right. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the From the Farm Yard podcast. In today's episode, we will be talking about your garden layout. What are some specific things to think about when it comes to building your garden? So, as gardeners, we've put our gardens in certain areas that would be beneficial to the crops that we produce. But, I mean, when we first started, at least on my side, we may not have known, like, oh, we could have moved this to a better area now that I've learned more. So we're just going to share some things that might be beneficial for you when you are building your first garden. Like certain areas you can put your garden beds that'll help your plants grow and flourish with and have an abundant harvest. But the first thing, obviously we've gone over this a couple times in episodes. These are kind of it's all gardening, so it's a lot of repetitive things, but like in different concepts. But
yeah. A lot of it is very repetitive, but
you'll get the point.
Exactly. And repetitiveness is not always a bad thing to help you remember something. So that's how I look at it, at least.
First up is sun exposure. So obviously plants need sun. That's how they grow. They need sun. So you want to establish your garden in a very sunny area on your property. The sunniest, like, the better. Because some plants require like full sun. Some require partial sun or full shade. Take that into consideration. If you know what you're going to plant, like the certain items, like maybe something requires full shade, which typically a lot of vegetables, like, I don't know how that works, like what they all require. Each plant's different. But
a lot don't require full shade. There's like a select few. But if you're growing like lettuces in the middle of the summer, those can be considered full shade. But what a lot of people do is they'll plant them in like their tomato rows in between the rows, just because it's the most shaded spot, because lettuces don't like the heat. They'll start bolting when it gets really hot.
So this goes back to another episode we did, which was planning out your garden. So if you know what you're going to plant, putting your plants in specific areas that may benefit them in the future. So let's say raise garden beds. Maybe you know that maybe half your garden is in shade, half your garden is in a lot of sun. So planting things that need a lot of sun in the sunniest part and planting things that need more shade in the shadier part. Just taking all that into consideration, but basically put your garden in the sunniest area, because all plants need sun. I mean, each plant needs maybe a different amount of sun, but all plants need sun.
All plants need the sun in order to photosynthesize. Going back to, if you're older, schooling years, photosynthesizing, that's what it needs to in order to produce what it's going to produce. If it's not able to do that, it can't maintain like cell development, new growth, things like that. But everything does need sun, whether even things that are full shade, they still need sun. They just don't want direct sunlight hitting them. So it is a whole lot of things, but we'll cover all that for you.
Yep. So next would be watering and water sources. So obviously, along with sun, plants need water. So you can, if you have put your garden in an area as well where water can reach it. So if you have a hose or you want to hook up a sprinkler, like, that's a good idea. It's convenient. Or, if you just have a sink, fill up your, buckets of water and then a watering can and water your plants. But if you're doing it for like convenience, having a hose that can reach, your plants, or even like if you wanted to install like a pump straight to your garden. I know sometimes that's not, like, for certain situations that you may not be able to do that, but like for convenience, you need a water source. It doesn't have to be right there. Like I said, buckets of water, watering can works fine too.
Yeah. And also, well, with that, there are different systems of watering. When your plants get a little bit older, you can do the Oyas. Those are really good. They're clay pots that you dig in the ground and you put them within 2 feet of plants, like people do a square and then you can put them in there and the roots will attach to the Oya and draw out whatever water is needed. Drip irrigation is good, but also you still have to have a hose. It still has to be connected to a water source. If you are doing, like if you live in a neighborhood like I do, I mean, I need an 80-foot hose, so I have one 30-foot and one 50-foot to be able to reach all my garden to the backside of my property. Well, the backside of our yard to do the duck pools and to water trees. I just prefer that 80-foot hose over anything. I could probably get away with a 70-foot or 60-foot, whatever, but 80-foot just gives me more room to do different things. And if you're thinking about, this also goes back to our second thing, with like permaculture design. If you are looking to put your garden in the sunniest space or the sunniest space at all, or you're going to build a house, whatever, if you're looking at new land, the permaculture idea is you're going to have your house in one place. Closest to the house is going to be things that you visit every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, more frequently throughout the day, like the garden or chickens to get eggs. But as you get farther away, you could have an orchard out there that you're only going to visit a couple times a year, more than likely. Bushes you can have out that way because you're not going to be harvesting blueberries all year long in most cases. You can, but varieties, all that. But when you're thinking about that, think of where the sun is, but also think about if your house is going to be going right here, what do you want closest to your house?
Yeah.
You might not want chickens that close to your house, but you're going to be frequenting that so often you don't want to make a mile trek down through the woods to get eggs, or your garden. I mean, you might like that. You might like the idea of having it a little bit farther away. It might just be a better spot. But see if you can move your house there so then it's also easier for like water sources and some other things that we're getting ready to talk about.
And another thing with water is like establishing your garden. Don't establish your garden in a low area that like water will just set, because that'll make your soil very soggy, and then that'll like, it could cause like root rot, or it's too much water, then it ruins your plants, or blah blah blah.
Root rot is really bad. I had like one of my tiered planters, they didn't have any holes on like the outer cups on them. And I was like, why is everything dying? Nothing is growing in these things at all. And sure enough, I dumped it out and it was a whole lot of water. And I was like, that sucks. But now I know this year I'm going to drill holes in the bottom of it so it drains easier. And so I can be able to move it and everything. The other thing is, if you are living somewhere where you're on a hill, I mean, this does somewhat pertain to water sources. The water is going to be running off really quick. So you want to be able to catch as much, like if it's raining, you're going to want to catch as much of that water as possible. So maybe terraces are the best thing for you. You can look it up. Basically, you're just flattening out a small area for the water to kind of pool, because it'll still eventually run off. You're not just keeping it there. It's going to run off. It's going to flow different places. But terracing is a really good idea. And also, watering some plants, like tomato plants, they don't like their leaves sprayed with water, so sprinkler systems are not the best option. Drip irrigation would be better for that, or the Oyas, because it will cause blight and mold to grow on the leaves, but also keeping them pruned. And I'm going to show all of this. I showed it last year, but I'm going to be showing how to prune all of that this year, and I'm sure you will be too, showing a whole bunch of different things that everybody's going to be doing. So. Yeah,
and it's just like, it's taking your space and cultivating it to make it the most beneficial and the most like work efficient, the most efficient like it can possibly be. So you're using your space, and making it as efficient as possible. But next is soil. So we kind of talked about this last episode, or one of the past episodes. I don't even know anymore. But finding healthy soil. So if you have a place that has like good healthy soil, it might be a good idea to put your garden there. If you're doing in ground like planting. If you're doing raised beds, and you can take that soil, put it in your raised beds, or, add your own soil. So if you have a place with good soil, it might be good to use that as a place to establish a garden as well.
Yeah. And what I would do with that is, like, hypothetically here, or if this is you, if you go out and you buy a 30-acre property, and some of it is, well, a large portion is pasture, and it's like different elevations, all that. Take a soil sample from like different places on your property. I mean, if it's wooded, you obviously, if you want to clear trees, go for it. But you already have the pasture land, make it a little bit easier if that's what you want to do. If you want to clear trees, but take different soil samples and see which ones are better, to see which ones might need the least amount of amending. And that can save you time, or you can just mix some really good compost in to the ground through tilling, and you can have an amazing garden. And if you're going to be doing anything with and also with the soil test, most of the time your county will give you, like, they will do free soil tests. You just have to like check around, see, but they will do it. And then I had something else. I can't remember, but I did say something else.
But like you said, if you have already good soil, that could save you on time, but it can also save you on money, because if you had that good soil already with you, that saves you from like buying soil from a company or buying soil from a store. And it's like we talked about in last episode, like if you do have bad soil, raised beds might be better option for you. Then you fill it with the good soil, all that stuff.
And if you have different areas on your property as well, like you have one area that's like perfect soil to grow anything you need, like you can throw compost on it and make it even better. But if you have an area of your property that's like really acidic, berry bushes love acidity.
Right.
So even if you don't, well, if you want them, but you didn't know where they were going to go, maybe look at there, because the soil's already acidic there. You don't have to really amend it at all. Just till it up.
It's working with what you have on hand.
Yeah, and instead of doing a lot of amending, amending can get. I've never amended anything, but from what I've heard, I mean, it can get pretty expensive if you're not doing it right, whatever. But with the soil kits and things like that, they'll even like tell you what you need to add, like the exact amount, I think is like the exact amount that you need to add of each thing or whatever to make it a good balance. But again, all of that, take it with a grain of salt, because it might be different where you are. Where I am, you can go get a soil test too.
Right. So. These are like opinions from our own experiences, and we're just sharing them with you. So do your own research per usual. But the next is wildlife exclusion. So if you live in an area like me, very wooded area that has a lot of deer, birds, rabbits, and they're just like after your garden, you may have to do something to prevent them from getting in your garden. So if you have deer or rabbits, fence around your garden. If you have berries, like blueberries, and the birds are just getting them, you may have to literally build a whole like cage around your blueberry bushes. That way they do not get in there and eat your berries, because it's protecting your crops, your harvest that you worked hard on, just going to waste per se by the animals eating it. Or you could let them eat it. You could if you wanted to, but as a prevention, fence, or there has to be that you want a barrier between your garden and the wildlife. That way they're not getting rid of all your produce and eating it and destroying your garden.
Yeah. My great-grandparents, we built the garden over at their house, and I mean, their whole backyard's fenced, metal chain link, and I was like, nothing should be able to get in here. They live in a neighborhood, so there's no deer, no nothing like that. They have a groundhog living underneath their shed.
Those are fun.
And it's not just one. They've seen at least 4 different ones, and then babies every once in a while.
Oh, I forgot about
And
those.
we
Those.
had to build a fence around the garden. I mean, I didn't mind. It was really easy, but it was not take into account all of that. But building a fence around the garden is helpful. Also, I'm gonna say this not because anybody has done it to me, but sorry, neighbor just started cutting grass for some reason. Gonna ignore that.
Things they
But
do in February in Virginia. They cut grass.
exactly. But one thing that you might want to look at is if you live in a neighborhood and your garden is open, like if I didn't have my fence behind me at all,
Right.
I mean, that's a 6-foot barrier fence. Everybody would be, if I didn't have that, everybody would be able to see what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
They could come over here and they could take whatever they wanted. Our trees are on the other side of that. And I'm actually worrying about the trees when they start producing. And I mean, I'm not too worried about it, but it is something you need to look at for even people to start like wanting to take things or whatever. But
Right.
most of the time it's not a problem, but I just got lucky with my fence right there. So yeah.
And lastly, we have garden beds, which we talked about garden beds last episode, but this is just like something to add to it. Garden beds don't have to be the same size for every garden. They can be any shape. You could have, rectangular, square, you could do rows, you could do triangles. It doesn't matter. Whatever works best for your space, whatever is most efficient for your space, if you can fit it, throw it in there. That's what I always say. If you can fit another like small garden bed, doesn't have to be, your normal size, then use it. If you have space, build a garden bed. And it doesn't mean that gardens aren't necessarily just rows either. Like I've heard people like that's like a myth about it. Doesn't have to be just rows. You can do squares, you can do rectangles, you can do a bunch of different types of there's so many ways to do gardens. There's so many options, possibilities. Whatever works best for your space, go for it.
There are I have 2 5-foot by 7-foot garden beds, and then the other ones are actually kind of more like rows. They're probably 4 by 8 or 4 by 12, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And those work really well for certain things. The 5 by 7s, I did tomatoes in them. It was really hard without a tomato cage on them, and I did not do that first year, obviously. But they work incredibly well for corn because corn has to be in such close proximity to each other to be able to pollinate and to form the ears. And those work really well for corn. I know that, and I grow really only corn in those areas with beans for companion planting and nasturtiums and things like that. Where my 4 by 12-foot garden bed I use for tomatoes, I can put 1 row on each, like 2 separate rows, and still grow things in the middle. And that works amazing. And it's just figuring out different things, but you don't have, like Reagan said, and you don't need to have everything exactly the same. You don't need to have a garden bed just because somebody else has it that same way. Do a circle garden bed. I have kiddie pools, which is basically a raised bed that can fit anywhere. They're mobile. You can move them. Do a triangle. I don't know. Fill in spaces. If you want, I've had this idea. So everybody knows how the sunflower, it's the circle and then the petals go out.
Mm-hmm.
Do 1 circle bed in the middle and then have like different triangles out from each side, kind of looking like the sun or something.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would be so fun. I haven't done it. I want to really bad. I just don't have the space for it. Do that and it'll look freaking amazing.
And those options work best for your space. You've learned from experience that like certain things need to be planted in certain areas due to the sun or the water, or it's looking at your space, finding what works best in those areas, finding what fits best in those areas, and really cultivating your garden to the position where it's most efficient.
Yeah, and add on something with that. If you're doing like if you're I happen to get lucky and it is a south facing garden. That means nothing that I plant unless I'm like planting outwards towards the south is going to be blocking something else. But if I'm growing corn that's going to get like 8 foot tall, I don't want to be growing bush beans in the row behind that to where the sun can't get to it because they need sun.
Mm-hmm.
If you can switch them because it's going to help long term in a better production. I mean, the corn's going to do really well, but the beans are not going to do as well. So definitely move things around. And if you have the southern exposure like I do things that are taller in the back and then go forward, kind of like an auditorium or amphitheater from like way back in the day.
Yeah.
Have the higher seats up here and then go down. And I just, that's just what my mind went to. But do things like that, move things around. And if things don't go well one year, you have a second chance the next year. Every year is the new year with gardening. If you didn't like something, don't grow it again. If you want to try something new. You don't have to try the same thing every year. I think that would make gardening kind of boring, in my opinion, at least. So mix it up.
Right. And if you saw that, the specific garden bed didn't work the way you wanted it to, you can build another garden bed to fit in that space, or build 2 separate garden beds or whatever. Gardening is supposed to be just like an experience to learn and to enjoy the process, because it is growing. You're growing your garden and you're growing your knowledge. And I think
that's an expression of creativity.
Yeah. And
I mean, you're showing who you are through that. Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's pretty much everything for today's episode. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, just grow on, everybody. Honestly,
there you go.
We're all rooting for you in the end. So it's grow a garden and experience it. Even if you don't know why you're growing a garden, grow a garden. You might like it. It doesn't have to be a vegetable garden. It can be a flower garden. Or if you want to incorporate both like I am, do both. I mean, I'm doing vegetables mixed in with flowers here and there. I'm going to work on doing trap crops this year, which I'll keep y'all posted. We might be able to get a link or something in the bottom to go along with that, or I'll make a post, whatever. We'll figure something out.
Yep.
But it's all express yourselves is really all I have to say.
Yep.
Grow what you want to grow.
Yep. Garden season's coming, y'all. Get out and grow a garden. We'll see y'all in the next one.